Woke up early, dawn's out shining. Coffee brewing, thoughts aligning. Business world keeps redefining. Success is more than just headlining.
Good morning, folks. I'm Fred McMurray, and we're back for another episode of Pillars Principles with Ray Pillar and Jim Treleaven. Ray, Jim, good to see you, folks. How we doing?
Good. Another beautiful day here in
Good to see you, Fred, and good to see both of you as well.
Yeah.
All right. So we've had great response on other platforms, and for our listeners, it looks like we're going to be going to FM radio very soon. So congratulations to Ray and Jim. People like listening to you, may not like looking at you, but do like listening to you.
It's okay. I don't like looking at myself either.
One of the K-Fred Prime Live shows I did, they were talking about when you look at yourself in the face in the mirror, what do you see, or how do you talk to yourself? And my response was, when I look at my face in the mirror, I'm like, do I got to shave today or not? And that's the only thing in my brain. So enough of the fun stuff. So let's go and talk business. Let's talk about Pillars Principles. Today, the topic is my business is growing and I need help. How do I hire people? Ultimately, how do I manage people? And finally, how do I fire people if I need to? So let's start out with how to hire people. Ray.
Well, if your business is already growing, your thinking is a little bit late, because you probably should have started thinking about hiring and how you're hiring and who you're hiring before your business started to grow.
So I screwed up. Let me alone.
And the thing that comes to mind is begin with the end in mind. So
we're going to go Covey.
Yeah,
Stephen Covey. Begin with the end in mind.
It's really important to think about who you're hiring, and because you're not going to be hiring, at least if you're beginning with the end in mind, you're not hiring someone that's going to be there a couple of days, a couple of weeks, a couple of months, or probably more than a couple of years. Right now, I have an employee who's been with me about 18 years, so I'll leave it to Jim at that point.
All right. Well, so you said begin with the end in mind, and so the idea is that you're going to look at how long. If this is a long-term employee, you want to make sure you take that in mind. What other, besides beginning with the end in mind, what other tips or principles would you apply to the hiring process, or to the look? Maybe it's when you start to look, where are you going to look? How'd you go out and find people?
Well, you look at your current employee base. Okay, does that person have potential more than what you originally hired that person for? So all of my office employees have worked out in the field, but you constantly, when you're talking to them, you look, does that person have the potential to work in the office if they're working out in the field now? All
right. So you're talking with respect of having existing employees. Let's say you start a business, somebody starts a business 4 months ago. We'll say it's 4 months ago, just for the pure heck of it. And they start getting all these maybe show hosts involved. So now all of a sudden they've got this radio station that's growing and growing and growing, and they're finally starting to look at having to hire people. So they don't have any real employees. How does that person go out and actually find employees, or where do they go? And so how does that person find employees?
Well, you have to hire somebody that you think is capable of doing the current job you're looking to fill that position for. Okay, and then you have to look beyond that once you get to know them and see how they're performing in the position you hired them for. Now, if you feel that their performance is fantastic, can they go beyond that point?
Okay.
Okay, so yeah, you have to look at the potential of everyone you know, all your employees.
Yeah, assuming we get some. I get it. All right, Jim.
Okay, so the businesses that I have been involved in and run over the years are a little bit different than Ray's. And so I really do appreciate the challenge that Ray faces in hiring. So let me talk about two classes of employees. All of those companies have been technology companies. And so the first class is most of the companies are having turnaround. So they're all in some sort of challenging position, which means, generally speaking, the management team is an issue. So, and more or half the time, the management team has already been removed, which is why I'm there. So the first challenge is hiring senior people. And in turnarounds, probably the most important position is the CFO. So I've been fortunate in most cases to know a number of CFOs who I can just network with and find that way. Sometimes they're, well, I should say network directly, or some of those people know other people. So generally for the senior people, it's been a networking challenge to find a CFO, a CTO, a CIO, whatever it might be. CTO in most cases is the important one. So that is generally how that one is done. Those are pretty important positions, and I can do it through my network. For the other people, the technical people, that's a little bit more of a challenge. Obviously, the CTO that's his main job, but interestingly enough, more often than not, I've been very successful, well, at using, that's some networking there, but very successful at using universities. I have connections at a number of universities, and getting some excellent people out of the universities has been very successful for those kinds of positions. And as well as through some networking on that side. So it's, in most cases, we required additional really good people to get things going. The other challenging area for most of those companies was marketing and sales. So I would call Fred.
I'm down with that answer. Yeah, you beat me to the marketing answer, so I'm really happy there. That's a phenomenal answer.
I couldn't leave that on the table, Fred. So there you go.
Appreciate that, Jim. Appreciate that. So, all right. So what I heard from you is if you're looking for executive type, upper level folks, you're looking throughout your network. And then
generally speaking, yes, either directly hiring from the network, or the network finds the people for me as well.
All right. So then on the lower level side, since you were primarily in tech area, so we're talking about, in theory, tech folk.
Yes. And mostly software companies, so mostly programmers.
All right. So then you're looking in universities for grad level students or newly graduating students?
In most cases, that works, actually. Mostly graduate students, but undergrad students, you know, in good computer science, engineering programs, you know, they can hit the ground running. There's no question about that. They have the skills coming out of school that would be perfect for those kinds of positions.
All right, so I'm going to go back to Ray and say, and then I'll hit Jim with the same question of, in this topic, in this question, what are the gotchas? What are the things you have to look out for that can sneak up and bite you in what you said earlier?
I would say, I don't know if
there's always a gotcha. There's always something that bites you in the butt.
In most cases, you have to hire someone to find out what their capabilities are. They don't even know. So I've hired people who I thought, well, you know, we needed somebody, so I'm going to go ahead and hire this. And they turned out to be really fantastic, and they developed into something greater than what we originally hired them for. And then I've hired people that I thought, oh, this person is really fantastic, very knowledgeable, but maybe lazy or not able to think on their feet or something like that. So you really don't know until you actually hire somebody. And the state of Illinois graciously gives us 30 days to figure that out. And sometimes you have to, in other words, if they're not working out, you basically have to say, hey, it's not working out, and you're at the 29 days. I'm sorry, we're going to have to let you go. But yeah, it's amazing how many times I've seen people come in with great credentials, great schooling, but they have no practical knowledge. What I'm speaking from now is the point when I was working as a hiring people, technical people, to work on equipment. And I've hired some people that came in and said, hey, I just graduated and I have my degree in electronics engineering or whatever, and they can't tell me if they can get a signal from point A to point B and how it gets there. But then people come in and say, hey, I just graduated high school. I've been, I like doing this kind of stuff. Can I have a job? And I hired them, and they work out really well. So it's difficult to say without hiring someone.
So what I took from that is that you basically are taking, at least if you're in Illinois, that first 29 days is kind of a beta test.
Yeah, well, I wouldn't call it a test. It's a look-see to see. Like I say, sometimes they don't know what their knowledge is until you're applying it to what you need them for.
Okay. Jim, back at you. Same question. What's the gotchas, the things to avoid in your approach?
Well, I have a joke about what Ray said.
Okay.
So I was an electrical and computer engineer. And so in where I graduated in Minnesota, or actually in Ohio, you could, and I graduated in Minnesota as well, so it worked both places. But if you were an electrical engineering graduate, you were automatically qualified as an electrician without apprenticeship or anything else.
Okay.
And that doesn't sound good.
No. And so I could design your computer, but if you wanted me to wire your house, you're in huge trouble.
That's what I was thinking, folks.
We'll just use 22 gauge wire. What?
Big trouble. So the challenge is a little bit different than Ray's, and that is for technical people, the more on the software side than what Ray was talking about. But it's hard right out of the box to tell. But and the other joke that I use is that human resource departments, which mostly I did not rely on them for hiring, but would always, in the old days, actually still, I just saw it recently, ask if a student is capable in a certain version of some particular programming language. That's a really silly question, because if you're good with any language, you can do any other language. But so it's a lot of companies, I've not done a lot of this, but this is super common. And that is they give new hires programming challenges, which has actually been very effective for most companies. To, here's a program that we would like to have you develop, and it's not obviously extensive, but you can tell right away from that kind of a thing. The example of that is my youngest son, who was ADHD and an athlete, so his grade point was not super high. And he asked about, how many people would ask about his grade point. And I said, probably none. And he had won several worldwide programming challenges. So I said, they're going to give you a programming challenge and you will be just fine. And so he got hired everywhere he went. But So, and no one asked him about his grade point, as I predicted. So,
So
for those kinds of
Yeah,
people,
that would be the best way to find someone with a programming challenge like that. Yeah.
oh, without question. And most companies, or actually almost all companies, use that now for new hires. And so
that almost that almost sounds like when I was in college and they'd give me programming. On the exam, they'd give you write this program, and some people were top down and other people were bottom up, and I was kind of like inside out. Um, I picked the one part of the program I knew how to write and wrote from there. So it kind of like expanded, which was, I don't know, never quite good. All right. So to sum up, if you're looking to hire folks, your own, if they're upper level, you're looking at potential university or your own network. Who do you
Right.
know in your own network? I guess LinkedIn was kind of founded on that whole idea. If we're looking at tech, we're looking at, or lower level non-executive, we're looking at universities, places like that. Ray, you got any place else you want to add into that list of where to find people?
Well, most recently, of course,
Oh, that's bad.
we were looking at, I think the majority, if not almost all of our employees currently come from recommendations from other employees.
So in other words, but here's the issue. If you don't have any current employees,
You start from scratch.
okay.
On normal advertising, yeah. But right now we are not, I'm trying to think, we haven't done any advertising except towards the end of COVID. We hired one of the companies that does that, but that was just for a short time. And I think that's the only advertising we other than when we first started.
All right. So in the time we got left, I want to jump to the other side of it. We'll talk about HR and building employees at a later date. So since we talked about the hiring, let's talk about the firing. Okay. When do you fire somebody? What do you got to do to fire somebody? And how do you fire somebody?
Okay. So I look at it from the standpoint, there's two types of firings. One is blatant and one is not so blatant or not as obvious. So if it's a performance issue, then you even if it's not a performance issue and there is some other quirk in that person's personality that doesn't make them able to work with other people, you need to document everything that happens, so that this person first has maybe a first warning, and with that warning, it's basically, if this particular behavior continues, then there's potential for us to let you go. And then if they get the second warning, same thing, it's a little bit more severe. You also give time frames for performance enhance, to become better at what they're doing, or not to do what they're doing that is bad for the company. And then when you get to the third point, that's when everything is documented, what they did, how it's affecting your business, and the fact that they were given lots of time to correct that. So that type of firing is textbook, I guess. The other type is, I had an employee that was blatantly swearing at other employees out loud, shouting, and I just walked up to that person. I said, "Leave now, you're fired." Okay, I paid a little bit because of that. And then another person was seen on a video that walking into the office and taking some product and walking out. All I did was call the person over and I said, "Would you look at this video?" And this person did, and see the product walking out, and she looked at me and says, "Am I fired?" And I just looked back at her. And she could have said many different things. Okay, this person could have said, "Oh, I'm just borrowing this. I'm going to return it," or a thousand other things other than "Am I fired?" And of course, I just said, "Sure."
So let me ask you this: when can you use a paintball gun and just shoot them with a paintball? Never mind. Sorry.
Well, it's tempting, but you can't do that.
Why not? Never mind. Never mind. I guess that would be considered assault, but with a paint. What? Never mind.
Yeah.
Okay. I love that idea. Shooting somebody. You're out of here. Shoot them with a paintball gun. Okay. We'll move on. Jim, you fired many people. No, just because you're a lucky guy, I guess. So tell us about your firing experiences. Why did you do most of the firings you did?
Okay, so there's two kinds. One is the kind that Ray was talking about, and you should have fired that person because they weren't very fast on their feet anyway, Ray, and given you the right answers that you suggested. But one is, there's the performance issue, and so that I think Ray covered the right steps for sure. In every case, you should put someone on a performance plan. And so that they can correct, because frankly, if they can turn it around, right, it's a lot cheaper than trying to hire a new person. So, in virtually every case is putting them on a performance plan and giving them whatever support they might need to succeed under the performance plan. And if that doesn't work out, then it's very important, I think, unless it's the kind of the case that Ray talked about, but in the companies I've done, that's almost never been the case. So is to treat them as fairly as you can relative to their job. So, a reasonable amount of severance, in some cases, even being willing to serve as a reference. It depends if the performance is terrible, but not. But and so it's there's a process that is pretty well understood, and in my case, not as important as Ray's in terms of regulations, but that process generally works pretty well. The second case is, since most of the companies I did were turnarounds, and I'll use a couple of examples, there is a reduction in force, which is a significant
layoff.
Yeah. Layoffs are now called reductions in force. And so there's a way to do that as well. So the most difficult one was a publicly traded company that was reasonably good sized, but actually was in serious trouble. The company had very large customers who had not been served well, almost all, really large customers. Fortune 10 customers who were either looking to replace the software or sue the company. Many of them had more lawyers than we had employees, but anyway. And the company only had 2 months of cash before it was going to have to liquidate. This is a publicly traded company on the national NASDAQ exchange. So the only way out of it, which shocked me that the previous management team had not thought of, was the challenge of, we had to reduce 40% of the employees.
Whoa.
And just doing the financials, that's what had to be done to survive beyond the 2 months. Now, the challenge is, how do you do that and serve those, pardon the language, pissed off customers better? So I'm the new guy from Chicago. I don't even know where the men's room is. So how am I going to do this? So I'm going to give a little kudos to HR, that they were the woman running HR was the one I relied on. And we actually put together something called the Guiding Coalition. It's in the change management process. So we had employees we had senior employees, and we had an employee from every group. a software engineer, a customer service representative, a salesperson, and it was about 10 people, and gave them the challenge. What 40% are we going to do, and how are we going to structure the company to better serve the customers? And they did just a wonderful job. The company actually survived and did well. Now, how do we treat the 40% that are going to be leaving the company? And the same thing is true. The reason that we did it almost immediately is if we waited till the end of the 2 months, we wouldn't have had any cash to do severance. We did it immediately, and we had enough cash to actually do reasonable severance for those people. It was very important for the long-term health of the company, how the employees that stayed viewed how we handled it, to actually treat them as fairly as we could. So we were able to treat the employees that were let go fairly from a financial standpoint. And we actually said we would help them find new positions. And in many cases, we were able to do that. And most employees really appreciated that. And the employees that were remaining, they were important because we needed them to perform really well. And this group actually designed an organization structure that facilitated better customer support. But everybody in the company that remained knew they had a voice in the room. The person sitting next to them was in there. It wasn't just the jerk from Chicago walking in and walking down the hallway and pointing at people. So it actually went pretty well. And we've used that process in a number of companies when there's a significant reduction in force. You can do it in a way that actually is very fair and helps the health of the company going forward. So I've seen any number of examples, and I will not mention them by name, where the large companies where they pre-announce reductions in force, which basically means no one is working until that.
Right.
So how you help the people who remain is just as important as you help the people who are gone. So anyway.
So that's actually pretty sneaky. You get the employees to chop the other employees. I like that. That's like, well, they did it. I didn't pick you. They did. That's pretty sneaky.
Well, actually, the people that were leaving didn't care who did it, but
I'll tell you what happened to me. I was part of a large layoff, so they laid me off and all the people that worked for me, which was about 40, I think, and spread out throughout the central part of the United States. And then a couple of weeks after I got laid off, got a really good severance and vacation time because I hadn't taken it for years and all this. They give me a call, so I answered the phone. And I said, "Hi, what can I do for you?" We got a problem, Ray. What's that? All the people that worked for you, we need to fire them too.
Oh no.
And the problem was because they were scattered out all across the central part of the United States, they also had a lot of product with them. How do you capture the vehicle they were in and all the products inside that vehicle and fire them at the same time? So they rehired me to do that, which was probably the worst position I ever had in my life because I anguished over that every single night I was doing that.
So you got hired to be the executioner.
I got hired to be the executioner. Yeah.
All right. So
I'm shocked you never took vacation, Ray, but I'm actually not shocked.
I'm making up for that now.
With Ray being hired as the executioner, I don't know if we can come up. I don't know if I could come up with a better exit point from today's pillars principles than that. You've heard the Jim's sneaky way, get the employees to hire them or fire them, and raise. Let's put them on a 29-day test regime when you hire them. So these have been, I guess you could say, pillars, principles of hiring and firing. We'll be back again with Ray Peller and Jim Treleaven and your erstwhile host, me, for another episode in a week. Have a great day, folks.
Woke up early, dawn's out shining.